we are kind of from the organization side. So people do come up with a lot of questions when they want to kind of talk about Everest or when we suggest them Everest. There are concerns, of course, about the basic fitness level, how tough is it, and all that, whether I will be able to do it. But moreover, many people do ask me that is it worth doing it? Because it is the most popular probably trekking trail in Nepal, and there are people from everywhere kind of flocking around on that trail. And yes, it is quite a busy trail, so there's no question of wilderness as such, and which typically people look out when they want to go out for treks in the mountains, especially in the Indian Himalayas. They're looking out for little wilderness, little uh, solidity, kind of solitary movements and things like that, which is not possible here. So they keep asking me that, is it worth it? It's too crowded. Why one should go? So I thought you should give a perspective on that, why one should go to Everest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before that, I'm going to kind of skip one slide. I don't know why it is not working. Yeah. So this is, I will kind of talk about it later. You can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, hi. So thanks for inviting me, Milind. And yes, precisely, why Everest Base Camp? And I think that back in the day in 2004, when we sort of signed up for the so much, and that would be my first advice to people: don't think so much, just do it because out of the sheer pleasure of being in the mountains. And then when it comes to Everest, I think you're absolutely in hallowed ground because of the world's 14 peaks, which form an elite group of mountains which are over 8,000 meters. 10 of them find their home in the China Tibet region, and Everest is the tallest of them all. So I mean, there is a certain amount of whether you want to call it, the history and the drama that surrounds the highest peak in the world, and the kind of interest it generates, and the kind of stories that go about it. Starting from Edmund Hillary being the first person to climb it. We will talk of Hillary a little more going forward. But I think there is magic in that because at the end of the day, anybody even today who wants to climb to the top of Everest has to go do the same trail that we would be doing and right up to base camp, because that's how everybody gets into the acclimatization zone. So it's you're walking that path, absolutely, which Hillary walked on, or any of the greats that you can think of walked on, whether it's a Reinhold Messner, or I mean anybody that you can think of, or an Ed Listiers, or anybody, all these Sherpas who I think the record is some 21 climbs or something like that. So it's an absolutely iconic trail. So there is just unparalleled, the kind of views that you get, and the entire feel of the trek is just something that cannot be it cannot be replaced, and it's just fantastic. And I think that when you do a trek, there are a couple of things that I look for in a trek. One is, of course, the fact that you need to be it needs to be challenging enough, and you need to be in a place where at some point in time you'll have a 360-degree feel of mountains. By 360, I mean you're standing in the center, and you have mountains all around you, and you get that complete feel that you're in the center and you have these mountains around you, and you get that on this trail. And it is just something that you feel that you would feel absolutely elated having been able to go from sea level to 18,000 feet and back. So EBC completely ticks all those boxes. So this is definitely something I think that everybody should give a try. And there is treks are iconic, whether anything that is iconic. I mean, whether it's a song, whether it's a movie, whether it's a city. The reason it becomes iconic is that it has an appeal that sort of transcends time and boundaries. And definitely, I think EBC is one of those. So yes, you will never be alone on the trek because, as you said, it's a yak trail, and there will always be someone crossing your path, either a porter or a yak, or another trekker or another climber. But at the end of the day, I think it's just so beautiful that you really need to do.
And the kind of people that you come across, isn't it, Sharmila?
Yes, absolutely.
We will see, we'll discuss it more as we go along, but kind of people that you come across, you meet across. So I always kind of try to tell them that it is not that you're going on a trek which is in wilderness and anything of that sort. You will have your kind of pizzas and croissant and a great amount of coffee and everything on the trek. But at the same time, historical path where
Yes.
Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay had kind of walked at some point of time. And so many, as you rightly said, many climbers who have been there, including Donald Westner, Chris Bonington, and everyone.
Yes.
So it's the history that you walk through in terms of the mountaineering history. I would put it as that. Yeah. So Sharmila, coming to, we'll kind of take it further, but before that, I would like to kind of orient people quickly on the map. I'm not going to use my pointer because it created me trouble last time, but I'll use my cursor. I hope people can see it. So we fly into Lukla. And from Lukla, we are going to go along Phakding, Benkar, Jorsale, and Namche Bazar. We will kind of, as we kind of go through this session, we are not going to talk about each and every place, but we are going to take some highlights and some important places with some stories around that. So we will be kind of coming to Namche, where we halt for 2 days for acclimatization. And then we, of course, go down to Tengboche, where there's a big monastery out there. And from Tengboche, we go via Pangboche to Feriche. Again, in Feriche, we again take a break for 2 days for acclimatization, and a beautiful place. Of course, you will see the photographs later. And from Feriche, we will go via Labuche to Gorakshep, which becomes the kind of a base for going further to the Everest base camp, and to Kalapathar, which is a trekking peak, you can say, around 18,500 feet, 5,600 meters roughly. So this becomes your base for doing these two activities, and then usually we trail, come back the same way back. And just to tell some high points, because many people may have heard about the Gokyo region. So you have these Gokyo lakes. There are 5 lakes. I have some absolutely impressive photographs, which I will kind of show you later. So one can even do the Gokyo trail, go over the Shola Pass, and then go to Lobuche and Gorakshep and do the trip and come back, or the other way around. So this is giving in just where we are headed, how we are going to go. Lukla is more or less straight north of Kathmandu, northeast, you can say, of Kathmandu. Yeah, and this is a quick elevation chart which people can look at it at ease later, where if anybody wants to know about the altitude gain and loss and everything. So Kathmandu is typically at 1400 meters, Lukla airport is at almost 2800 meters, Namche Bazar is at 3440, then you have further Everest Base Camp as you go up is at around 5,180 meters. That's actually Gorakshep, not Everest Base Camp. Everest Base Camp is 5,300 meters. Yeah, and then of course we come back more or less the same trail back. Yeah. And I'll quickly put up a small summary also. The total distance that you go back and forth is 124.6 kilometers. Total height ascent accumulated is 7,542 meters. Descent is 7,539. This has been measured on the watch. So that's the reason there is a marginal difference, okay? Because as much as you go up, you come down. So it has to be precisely the same, but there is a difference of almost 3 meters out there, yeah? And the total height gain that you do right from Lukla to Kalapathar is 2750 meters. Sorry, somebody's unmute. Please
you
mute
can
them.
continue.
Yeah. So this is a quick kind of gist of that, because I don't want to get into the details. We are going to talk about more interesting stories about Nepal and especially Everest Base Camp. So people usually arrive. So I did not want to put an airport picture here. So I just put up a duffel bags the way you arrive at the airport. And then we spend 1 or 2 days in Kathmandu. And I have always found Kathmandu to be very charming, beautiful, and love Nepal, and I love Kathmandu and all those places. Yeah, I'm sure, Sharmila, you have been to Annapurna Base Camp, you have been to around Annapurna, you have come to Everest Base Camp, you have also been to Manaslu, unfortunately during the earthquake, but that we'll pick it up as a story later. But what do you think about Kathmandu?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. I think it's a really charming city. It's extremely chaotic, and yes, it has a couple of heritage sort of sites. but I'm not like really big into temples, etc. So for me, probably the best part of being in Kathmandu is to go to Tamil. And I think anybody from Mumbai would really completely identify it with sort of Kulaba Causeway, because you have all these stores which are selling all this jewelry and all these trinkets. You have all kinds of cuisine, because at the end of the day, everybody comes to Kathmandu. Everybody's flights come into Kathmandu, and it's all cultures are here. So you have every kind of cuisine which is available. And you have all the first copies of every gear that you can want to buy, whether it is North Face or any other company, and you get any gear that you haven't bought, you can you go to Thamel to the shops to source the gear, and it's an absolutely fun place to be in. And which was that restaurant that we had gone to, Milind? I remember one day I had come 2 days earlier, and we had gone to a really wonderful restaurant.
It is Garden of Dreams, where we
Garden
went and
of
had
Dreams.
we went for a lunch there, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's a must lunch for all those who go with 1 day to spare in Kathmandu. It was an absolutely beautiful garden which they sort of restored, and they have a really charming restaurant inside. It was absolutely wonderful.
It is, and right, almost in Tamil. It is not really anywhere away from Tamil. It's very much in Tamil. And I don't know whether you're aware of that, but you need an entry ticket to enter that premises.
Yes.
And there are many people, especially expats who are there in Kathmandu. They usually would come on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning, hang around in that garden, sit around, kind of be there for a long time, have probably lunch or a beer, and then go back home. So it's a very absolutely charming place, and right in Tamil, so which is the interesting part. And moreover, Sharmila, even I was not aware, but Kathmandu is one of the ancient cities. It's in the city belongs to 7th century. Yeah, so it has a lot of heritage sites, a lot of course, religious sites, because it's a confluence of Hindu and the Buddhist culture. So you have this Bodhinath Stupa, and everybody would be aware about this Pashupatinath temple, which is very famous. And then, of course, as the life goes around, it is also charming because you get to see all kind of things happening around when you go to these temple sites, especially. I guess it is something closer to Varanasi or so. I've never been to Varanasi, but I think the life would be something similar to that. This is Darbar Square. You can see all these old structures around, and these are all World Heritage Sites, by the way. Yeah.
Lot of Bollywood songs have been shot in Darbar Square.
Yeah, and the only I know is about the Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, but beyond that I don't know. Dhammaradam song, yeah. And very interesting. It is interesting for photographers. It is interesting for people, religious people, bended people. It is good for people who want to just do kind of even go and kind of chill out on a French restaurant and have a kind of wine. You will get the finest wine in the world out there. I can assure you of that. It's absolutely a charming place, absolutely, because of the world comes there. As you said, it is kind of it has all kind of restaurants, pubs, and that culture is also there. At the same time, has all the heritage which is backdated in a couple of 100 years back. Yeah. This picture I took up because I couldn't avoid this picture. Nothing to talk about in this kind of right now, but I found it to be very cute. So I said, yeah, I should kind of include this. Yeah, nothing to do with our current talk right now. And this is, by the way, has been shot by this Arsini guy. He's a photographer, and I will talk more about him later. Yeah, he has kind of gave us some photographs which are absolutely stunning. And this is Nepali food, which is a kind of traditional thali, where they call it dal bhat. And on the trek, you will find these everywhere written dal bhat, power 24 hours, or something of that sort. You remember?
Dalbhat.com it's called. Dalbhat.com.
Yeah, and Power 24 Hours or something. They have that during the Arun Annapurna, we saw that more. Yeah, and I somehow love Nepali food. I don't know why. I just love them. And so there are many very nice restaurants which would serve you very nice Nepali food, and they have a thakali, which is basically a part of Arun Annapurna, where we go to Muktinath. So there is a kind of place called Tukche, and the people who cook or the food in that region is supposed to be very delicious and very beautiful. They're very nice. So you have a lot of thakali restaurants out there. So here we kind of get over with Kathmandu, and then we are getting into the flights for Lukla. So, Sharmila, what has been your experience? I've been many times, but you tell me.
So these are all the secrets of the trek, which they don't tell you. Things they don't tell you before you sign up for the trek.
Yeah, I tell everyone.
Interesting. This flight from Kathmandu to Lukla. It's in this little thing that you can't even really call it a plane really, and you get into that, and you go through an absolutely narrow valley, and you can almost the sides of the mountain are so close you feel you can almost touch them, and then you land at Lukla airport. There you go, and it's supposed to be like one of the most sort of dangerous places to land in, and you can make out from this picture that it is actually the runway is sloping downwards, and the reason for that is that when the flight lands, you're sort of on an upward slope, so you start slowing down immediately. And on the reverse, when you're taking off, you sort of start gaining momentum as because you're going down the slope. And then heaven help you, if you gather enough momentum, you will fly, or else your plane will crash into the valley below. So this is an absolutely crazy flight, and it's all of 25 minutes, but your heart is in your mouth. And it's so charming that, we stayed in a lodge which was very close to the Lukla airport. In fact, it was just like, just off the...
You can see the lodge.
Yeah.
Sharmila, you can see that lodge. This is the lodge.
That's the lodge we stayed at.
Yeah.
So we used to hear this bell. So this bell used to go off because, once, if there is no flight, this runway is used by children to play, etc. And in the morning, the army used to meet over here. Like the army used to do their parade. There was army stationed at Lukla at that point in time, and I remember that the guys who came late for the parade, like those last 2-3 stragglers, they used to do somersaults on the runway. So I used to see them taking somersaults, going down and taking somersaults to come up. So it's an absolutely crazy thing. You are not likely to see an airport like this anywhere. Add to the trip.
So, Sharmila, what I've also experienced, like I have been in the flight many times, so at least 16, 17 times I've been in this flight. And every time, as you rightly said, your heart is in your mouth, and you don't know till the time you land there, actually. And so I always tell people that this is the most riskiest thing that you're going to do on the trip. Yeah. And I need to now cross-check and confirm whether the insurance covers this. I doubt whether the insurance policy would cover this.
Also, if Basanta is in the house, a big shout out to Basanta. He has, like, anybody who knows Basanta should talk with Basanta, because he has like the funniest stories for flights landing at Lukla. And the other really great memory that we share, the 2004 memory of Lukla, is that if you remember, in the lodge one day, we started drinking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
We were stuck for 3 days.
We were stuck there for 3 days. On the way back, on the way out, we were stuck there for 3 days. And then beyond a point, we didn't know what to do. So we started drinking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And somebody said that, oh, but it's only 4 in the afternoon. And then some wise person remarked that, but it is 7 o'clock somewhere in the world. And that is perfect logic. It's always helped us that every time you want to drink is the right time, because the earth is round and somewhere it is 7 p.m. and it is time for a drink.
But Sharmila, cheers for that. Yeah. Apart from those frustrated, like the time for 3 days was frustrating. Okay.
Absolutely.
Because it was raining like cats and dogs, and you never know when the flight. And finally, the way the last flight that took off in a condition like it was completely covered by cloud and crazy. So I don't think I want to fly it over. But there's hardly any choice, so you need to kind of do that. Yeah. So after this whole fun of the flight to Lukla, we are going to kind of go down to Feriche on that day, and later on Monjo. First to I keep missing in for Phakding, then to Monjo, where we'll cross into the national park of Sagarmatha National Park. And then we will climb up all the way to Namche Bazaar, which is again an amazing place. So en route you can see some kind of Chorten stupas, small monasteries with all the Tibetan kind of religious scriptures written on the rocks.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
Om Mani Padme Hum. And this is one of the old kind of man. They are having some ceremony at his house in Rood. I just kind of thought of taking a picture and putting it up here also. Yeah. And of course, you will see a lot of porters heavily loaded with, I don't know, 100 kgs maybe.
Yes.
It's just kind of crazy to see them walking and they go all the way up to Gorakshep like this.
Yeah. So I think what is important to note here is that this is the whatever the main economy, the main money earner for Nepal is permits to climb Everest and the economy that has developed around it. And everything that comes into Lukla, all the vegetables that we eat, etc., along the trail, everything is flown into Lukla from Kathmandu. And they've created such a infrastructure. As we go along the way, we'll see the kind of tea house, the tea houses that they've built where you can stay, and the food that is available, and they pretty much standardize everything. So like right from your first halt to all the way up to Gorakshep, it's more or less the same menu. Only thing that changes is the price. And if somebody is going to carry it up like this, I think it stands to reason that a cup of tea that costs you about 50 Nepali rupees in like a Namchi Bazaar will cost you about 150 by the time you get to Gorakshep, because that's just the cost of moving things. And this has become, not just this, but all these have like sort of now become big issues for really Nepal to take cognizance of and deal with going forward in terms of removing human wastage from the peak and removing dead bodies, etc. But I don't think that we should get like all this is the way of life for people there, and we need to appreciate it and really just move on from there.
So usually what is, there is always a challenge that we face at times from the clients especially, where they say to you, why you are kind of making them carry, you put them on the yak or a mule, the duffel bags that we have to carry. Yeah. So usually my reasoning to them is they are happily carrying it because it's a bread earner for them.
Yes.
If I give it to the yak, it pulls away a job of 3 porters maybe. Yeah.
Yes.
So it is better that we reward them at the end of the trip and things like that, just to kind of make sure that they're appreciated well, in short. Yeah. So Sharmila, again,
bridges.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! The other big thing about trekking in Nepal are these bridges. Most of them are Swiss or German engineered, and they're what are they called? Swing.
These are hanging bridges. So with iron ropes and things like that.
On your way from Monjo, and as you enter Sagarmatha National Park, you have to cross Bhutkoshi River or whatever is tributary 2-3 times, and your heart is in your mouth because it's physics. When you start walking on the bridge, it starts moving, and the movement of the bridge is maximum when you're in the middle. And when you're in the middle of the bridge, if you look down, there's a river that is absolutely raging because you're there in, we were there in May. So the river is raging below you, and you know that if you fall into it, you're done for. So that's obviously not an option, and you just have to cross it, and your heart is in your mouth. And then, as you said, when you look up, you see either one yak coming from the front who's trying to cross the same bridge, or some kid who just some Nepali local kid who just runs across the bridge as if it's like a highway or something like that, and you're left with holding yourself together and willing yourself to cross that bridge. And they were really something. And I don't know whether anybody's counted how many you crossed, but they're really amazing.
The amazing or the funniest part is you are anyway scared and you're walking on that bridge and you go halfway through on the bridge, and then you suddenly see one jopke or a yak coming from the other side, and then you're left with no choice but to go back, run back rather. So anyway, continuing further, this is the kind of just beyond Monjo. This is a entry point to Sagarmatha National Park.
Yeah.
This is a gate where you make an entry and all that. And from here, the climb, you have 1 or 2 more villages like Jorsale and things like that. And then from here, the climb actually starts for Namchi Bazaar. So this is one bridge which you cross, and then you relentlessly climb all the way to Namchi.
Yes. And what a walk that is. I still remember it is an absolutely unending climb. And I remember one guide with us who said that it's a 4x4. And we said, what do you mean by that? He said, basically you have to use all your gears and you have to just keep going and going and going and going. And Namchi Bazaar, there is just no sight of it.
It
And
is.
it's an incredibly long walk.
It is almost a gain of 700 meter, 850 meters if you do it from Phakding.
Correct.
Yeah, so it is definitely a big climb, and especially this last part, like when you cross the bridge, and then it is like
Yeah.
crazy. It just goes on and on and on and on. And what I try to tell people is, if you have reached Namche, you have kind of done almost like 40% of the job because of that climb itself, and you find it a little difficult as you approach Namche because you are gaining altitude. You are coming to 3,450 meters, so that's typically what happens. Yeah. This is similar. I kind of this is a peak that you can see at the back while heading up. Yeah, and this is the first sight of your goal.
Of Everest.
Yeah.
So there's a point along the trail where, which is called like the viewpoint, and that's your first sight of Everest, and you can see the jet stream on top of, that plume on top of Everest. And I remember when I was walking, you suddenly saw this group of people sort of who had stopped by on the side, and I thought, oh, like, have we reached? And obviously you were very far from reaching, but everybody was taking a break there. The porters had put their stuff down, and everybody was feasting their first glimpse of Everest, because that's obviously what everybody had come for. So it was your sort of the first sight that you got out of the mountain. So everybody took their fill of it and made their pictures, etc. And then you just continue the walk, the unending walk to Namchi.
Yeah. And so this is where we kind of enter just Namche Bazaar. There's a big stupa out there, right in the center of Namche Bazaar. And it's a very charming town.
Yeah.
Similar, how it is.
Just before that, I think there used to be an arc that used to say Namchi Bazaar. And I remember
Welcome to Namche Bazaar. Welcome to Namche Bazaar.
Welcome to Namchi Bazaar. And Namchi Bazaar is another couple of kilometers away from that. And just next to that was this, so like they made, one of those stations which soldiers make for themselves.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of Maoist activity at that point in time. So they were guarding the whole trail. And you had these people sitting there with guns, and you had this big entry that said, welcome to Namchi Bazaar. And then Namchi Bazaar didn't appear for the next 20 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's a very charming town. It's like a major hub for expeditions and treks going to the Everest Base Camp region or Gokyo or the other side, Renjula. And it has everything out there in that place. You have a
so as you can see from this picture, it's like shaped like a horseshoe. And you can actually walk right around that in a parikrama. And so you come to this opening in this valley, and maybe there are some other routes that take off from there, but this entire village is nestled in this horseshoe sort of space. And as you're saying, I think it's like the most fun place to be, because you get everything in Namchi Bazaar. They have a Starbucks, they have like the best food in the world, and you can go there in the evening to stretch your legs, and you meet that's when it really hits you that this is like the absolute melting pot of cultures, because people from across Europe, Russia, you name it, from Korea, Japan, US, South America. I mean, you name the country and they're there to climb the big mountain or to do other climbs in the region, because there are so many, there are, as we said, 10 of the 14 largest peaks are in that region. So there are people there to climb Choyu, there are people there to climb Lhotse, and you name it, and you feel like such a kacha limbu that you're just there to go up to base camp, and here are these guys in like the best gear in the world, the best brand, and they're like just so into it, and you just feel that vibe, that you're there in the mecca of mountaineering, and it's the most amazing feeling. And I think even if you don't do EBC, just go to Namchi Bazaar. I think it's completely worth the trip.
No, and Sharmila, one thing is, of course, has great amount of cafes and kind of bookshops.
Absolutely.
And
you can also buy gear there.
Yeah, exactly. I was coming to that. It has even branded gear shops out there, like Mountain Art, where you have Salomon was there earlier. So you get the best of the gear also right there, and it's just a charming place. And best of the bakeries, best of the pizzas, cake shops, everything is out there. Yeah. Sharmila, do you know this person? Do you remember him? Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't that Kancha Sherpa?
Yes, he is Kancha Sherpa.
Kancha Sherpa. So Kancha Sherpa was 1953 expedition, the British expedition, where Hillary summited Everest for the first time. And he was probably a porter on that trek, and he does a parikrama. As I said, it's in a horseshoe, and he does a parikrama of Namchi Bazaar, and he had crossed our lodge, I remember, and I think our guy said, this is Kancha Sherpa, and we all spoke with him, and he was kind enough to stand and talk. And we had gone in 2004, and in 2003 was a centenary celebration for 50 years for the first summit, and they were all honored. I remember he had told us that we were all taken to base camp, and the government gave them medals. But he said, I don't know where my medal is. Probably my grandchild was playing with it. It might be lost in the house. So these are the guys, he was just walking. He must have been in his 70s, and he was walking past with us with his prayer wheel and just going about his walk and talking so casually of being a porter on the first ever expedition to Everest. And these are the stories that you want to go to Everest for. These are the people you meet. This is what you want to be there for. And I mean, even the Hillary Norgay, this is Tenzing Norgay, right?
Yeah.
That story in itself is so fantastic that neither of the two guys ever said that who was the first person to step on Everest. And I mean, in times like this, when everything is so commercial and everybody wants that recognition and that success, they are like, they just belong to another world, and they were just like fantastic.
I'm going to talk about one more kind of climber later, just to show what these people are like. But I will keep it for a little later time. Yeah. So this is a monument that has been made in Namche Bazaar. When we went, it was not there. So this is kind of a little later development. And people can still see Mount Everest out here. The pyramid here that one can see with the ridge, which is called as Nupse Wall out here. Yeah. And then on the second day, we usually go out for an acclimatization walk to a monastery called Sangboche Monastery. And up there is a small kind of airstrip, but it is not a blacktop airstrip. So there's some small plane that comes and lands there. Not the 14-seater that we know, that we come to Lukla with, but this is a still smaller flight, so maybe 8-seater or so. So just imagine sitting in this flight and landing in that airport, which is almost at 3,600 meters, not even at 2,900 meters the way Lukla is, okay? So anyway, it's good fun to see all these things. And then, of course, we get some great views on the top. This is looking down again at Namche Bazaar. And these are the kind of views that one gets. You can see Everest, you can see Amadablam, you can see Kangtenga, you can see Thamsherku, and probably even Kusum Gangari at the back. So it's just stunning, just stunning. Sharmila, did we go and have a chai in the famous hotel?
Yes.
So here is that. Yeah.
All this marketing literature, they always say like, what's like, when you're talking of like a place to visit, or when, when they basically like a hotel, or like when you want to sell a residence place, they say, what's the selling point? It is location. And nothing can beat the location of this Everest Hotel, as it's called. And we walked like for 1.5 hours out of Namchi on our acclimatization. We climbed higher to get here. And it was so beautiful, so beautiful. I still remember we had tea in there. This wasn't there at that time. It was more basic. This is like really, this seems like a luxury hotel. I mean, like do you have clients staying here?
Yeah, we had one couple last December that went and stayed there.
Wow.
They wanted to, this lady who had contacted me because of some connections, and then she wanted to go and during her honeymoon, I guess, to Everest Base Camp north side, that is Tibet side, because there you can go and drive around. Yeah. So I said it's not possible because it is going to be like very cold. One thing, even in November, it would be very cold. Then she kind of called me. That thing was dropped for a while. And then she called me again and she said, do something. So I said, the best thing that you can do is go to Namche Bazaar, have a look at Everest, stay in Everest View Hotel for a day or two, and then just kind of turn back. And I think that's the best thing that you can do in December, and they actually did it. So actually these photographs are credited to them. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sean Sa is the gentleman, yeah, who met the husband. Yeah. And you can see actually from the hotel again, this is Mount Everest. Yeah, this is Everest. Yeah. And the good part is like our guide, which you can see, the extreme right one, Dawa. he was also quite enterprising. He just got them married again in Sangbeche Monastery in the Sherpa fashion. So
No,
that
Milind,
was
there's
the
a side
photo.
business that you can start. Say that we'll get you married at
Yes, Everest Base Camp or so. Yeah, that is a good business probably. That is possibly only with 50 people I can do that job with the current norms. These photos I put up because this has been put up by Sayan. He shared these photos with me, and this was shot in December, so you can see the light, and at the same time you can see that there's hardly any snow on the mountains. So it has been taken by a zoom, I'm sure, because this is the Nupse wall again, as I say, and this is the pyramid on the top, which is Everest, and there's hardly any snow that you can see around. Even this is Amadabla, so you can see there's hardly any snow in December, because usually we receive snowfall in only in late December onwards till Feb and onwards. That, yeah. But beautiful pictures. So I just thought of adding it up to the slideshow. Again, back to Namche Bazaar. Yeah. After doing this walk, we come back to Namche Bazaar, spend the night, and this is again shot in the night. You can see the lights and the stars around. So a beautiful picture. And then we start further on our trail further towards Feriche via Tengboche Monastery and then further. If you can see, Sharmila, out here, there are some structures. I'm just pointing it out with cursor.
Yeah, yeah.
That is where the Tengboche Monastery is. And you can see the trail going. And it is, I'm sure you have done it. So I always feel that this is the best walk that I've walked all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you should say that, because and I'm sure a lot of trekkers who are listening to us will resonate with this. But I think that most of us, when we come back from treks, at least I can completely on a given day remember a single day of the trek, and you remember what it felt like, what the weather was like, what the view was. And you just remember everything with such clarity. And this walk that you do from getting out of Namche to going into Tengboche was one of those, because you're doing this long traverse. And so on your left you have the mountain, and on your right you have like a whole array of snow-covered peaks. And that's when really the scale of everything hits you, because you're at 12,000 feet. And everything is towering, is almost twice the height. That means every peak around you is 22,000 or at least 20,000 feet plus. And the sky is that blue color which you only get in the Himalayas. It's that beautiful blue which is absolutely to die for. And you have this blue sky. We had this blue sky over us, and it was a sunny day, and there was like this light wind. And you're walking, and then the yaks are carrying goods, so you can hear the yaks moving, and they have that belt tied around their neck. So when they move, they make that ting 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 sound. And I mean, there you are, like right in the middle of it all, surrounded by this beauty, just drinking it in. And then you think, man, it really can't get better than this, because it is such a beautiful walk, as you're saying, and it just like it's imprinted on your memory. For like really forever.
This is the memorial that they have built up. I am sure even then it was there. It is Tenzing Norge's memorial, which is on the trail, and now they have kind of decorated or ornated much more now. And look at this picture. This is again taken by Arseny. What a shot it is.
Yes.
I always can make it a point to kind of sit here for at least a couple of minutes before I move on. It's just a mesmerizing place for me. And then you come to this place of Sanasa, which is again a small town. It's not town, come on. It's a small village in Rui.
Yeah.
And beautiful.
I think we had also stopped here for tea, right?
We did. Yeah,
so
we
it's
did.
like just along the path, and you stop there for tea.
Yes.
And everybody had, we pulled out all our boxes with all our besan laddus. And there you sat with this whole panorama in front of you, enjoying your hot lemon tea.
And I don't want to remind you about your shopping out there.
Besan laddu.
I don't want to remind you about your shopping there. All of you, Manisha, Ilya, everyone.
No.
Okay. Okay, so the trail continues, and then you can see this trail roughly going through the tree line, coming up to Sangboche Monastery. So we'll kind of get into the Sangboche Monastery quickly.
Yeah. So
Uh,
this part of the walk is also very interesting because you you have lunch at that village
Funkidenga.
near the river sort of, and then you get into that climb. And by this time it's afternoon. And I remember when we were climbing, as it always does, the weather had changed, and it was misty and sort of raining, and it was like very shrouded sort of a atmosphere. And then suddenly you came into this sort of a, like, maybe the size of a football field, and there was Kyangboche Monastery in front of you. And this is like one of, as you said, one of the biggest monasteries in the
Solukhumbu region, yeah.
And a lot of Japanese tourists, I think they attach a lot of importance to this monastery because there are Japanese tourists who come just to go to Kyangboche Monastery and back. So you see those trekkers also, and this is an absolutely stunning monastery. And I remember we went in the evening for prayers there, and it was cold and chilly, and there were these boys reading their manuscripts there. And I remember at that point in time, you had also arranged for us to meet the Rinpoche who had blessed us.
Yeah.
So that was also like a really special memory of Kyangboche.
We went to his house, which is just behind.
Yes, which is just adjacent.
And then we took blessings, and he had put up a dhaga around our wrist also, if you remember. Yeah. It was there with me for a long time. Yeah. So after doing all this at Tengboche Monastery, we will be proceeding further to the Pangboche village and Chomare.
Yeah,
and
just one more memory of Kyangboche.
Yeah.
I remember that we stayed in a guest house in Kyangboche.
Yes.
And at that time the restrooms were like, I think now you have guest houses which have washrooms inside. At that time it was in the field outside.
Yeah.
And I happened to go to use the washroom at night, and I cannot tell you what a beautiful sight it was, because the sky had cleared by then, and then you had these stars, you had the moon, and you had the moonlight shining on Kyangboche Monastery, which was a white and red color building. And they had those little butter lamps that they light, which were those little, so you could see the little flickering lights inside the monastery, and the fall of the moonlight falling on it, and it was so surreal. It was so surreal. I mean, I think that if you are brave enough, you should get out every night on this trek and go and look at the sky, because if it's a clear night, you will be rewarded for sure.
I have few pictures of night sky later. Yeah, I will show it to you later. Again, shot by Arseny. So they're stunning, absolutely stunning. So from Tengboche Monastery, we will kind of take a break at Dibuche and preferably go via Pangboche to Feriche. This is of course en route, and you can actually see the Chomare village at the end. Or maybe Pangboche, I'm not very sure right now. And this is the area where people trek and go towards the Amadablam base camp. This is Amadablam, the peak you can see, which is little haze out there, but there is Amadablam here. And this is Chomare, where we normally break for lunch and then take a turn and come to a small pass called as Feriche Pass. So from this pass, one can see straight down the settlement of Feriche, where we'll be again staying for 2 days, primarily to acclimatize, because Feriche is at 4250 meters, and but absolutely a stunning place again. This is like a complete meadow, and
I mean, can you see the sky?
Oh, it is beautiful.
Can you see the sky? Can you see the color of the sky? And this is like, I'm sure this is a picture where no filter was used. And also what you can also see is that how the vegetation has changed, because we started at something like 9,000 feet, so you still had some trees. By the time you get to Namche Bazaar, you're sort of getting above the tree line, and now you're at 14,000 feet, so it's absolutely stark, and Feriche is windy as hell, and you just have moss and lichen and like absolutely stunted sort of trees there, and it's a very stark and very different kind of beauty. The trail is getting tougher, it's more boulders. There are crevasses, there are holes in the ground, and it's the way you're transiting from that 9,000 feet to 14,000 feet, your lungs are feeling it, you're taking in the beauty, you're taking in the wind, and Feriche is really something else. I remember the wind. My God, the wind just didn't stop.
because of the sudden height gain, we always kind of spend one more day out there to acclimatize. But it's just stunning. The place is just stunning, and the views that you get from the top, it's amazing. Yeah, this is the kind of top where we go for acclimatization walk. Out here on this top, the village that you can see below is Dingboche, and on the other side of this ridge is Feriche, basically.
Yeah.
So one can go to Dingboche also, or one can go to Feriche. So you can make a halt wherever you
So this
want.
picture is actually taken looking back, like looking in the direction of Namche Bazaar.
Yeah, towards
so this is the bridge that separates Dingboche from Feriche.
Yeah.
And people have the choice of either spending the night at Dingboche or Feriche. And I think you used to choose Feriche because Feriche had an HRA.
Yes, it has an HRA, so I will kind of come to that. Yeah.
And I think you also mentioned that they have now some kind of a memorial for the climbers that.
Yeah, we will see that. We'll see that. Yeah. So this is Dingboche, and it has a phenomenal vista in front of you. The peak that you can see out here is Lutse Sar, and right down extreme end of the kind of valley is Mahal, another 8,000 meter peak. Yeah, and even Island Peak is here only. It's not very clear out here, but it's in the same valley. Yeah, and so I guess this is a similar picture taken by a zoom. Amadablam in the background again.
Beautiful.
Amadablam is basically, you can see that Ama is mother, and probably there's a taller mountain and there's a smaller mountain. It means probably a child. Yeah, but Ama definitely means a mother. Yeah. Again, in the Feriche in the evening, you can see the smoke coming out of the guest houses. So the fire is lit up inside the dining rooms. This is the memorial that they have built up. So they have put up names of all the people who kind of died while climbing Mount Everest, and everybody's name has been listed since 1922. So there are some Indian names also in that, and just people who have read Into the Thin Air or seen the movie Into the Thin Air, they will find these names to be more kind of familiar. This is Rob Hall from New Zealand. His company name was Mountain Madness. Scott Fisher from US.
Yeah. So essentially, there have been 3 or 4 big tragedies on Everest, and 1996 was one such tragedy. Where about 10 people died, I think 8 on this side and 2 on the Tibetan side. Then there was another big tragedy in 2006 or 2008, where again some 10-12 people died. And then in 2014, you had that big incident where that avalanche took place in that Khumbu ice wall, which killed a lot of porters. And so the climbing season was called off. And then, of course, 2015, the great earthquake, where again the climbing season was called off. So there were 2 back-to-back bad years for Everest. But this, as you said, is precisely the climbers of 1996. Rob Hall, who led the adventure consultant team from New Zealand. Scott Fisher, the American of Mountain Madness. Yasuko Namba is the Japanese lady who died. And Andrew Harris was, I think, a guide on one of the teams. And as you mentioned, Into Thin Air, I think. So I'm an avid trekker, but I think I'm a complete armchair mountaineer, and there are some 10 or 12 books which have been written on the 1996 tragedy, because Into Thin Air was one, and the climb was written as a sort of an answer to some of the accusations made about Anatoly Bukreev in that. And then almost every person who survived wrote their own story of survival. You had Beck Weathers writing Left for Dead, I think Back from Dead or Left for Dead or something. So I think I have read about 8 or 9 books just pertaining to the 1996 tragedy. So once you get like sort of drawn up in that, you just want to read everybody's viewpoint and what they went through and how the tragedy unfolded on the mountain. But the one book that I think you must definitely read is Into Thin Air. And yeah, I mean, just take it from there. And if you need more names, come back to me. I'll give you all the names.
Well, I tell people, irrespective of Everest or no Everest, one should read that book because it's a complete, the way it has been written and the way things, you will not leave the book once you take
Yes,
it for reading. Yeah.
absolutely.
But just remember Rob Hall because I have something small thing to tell you about Rob Hall. Sharmila, taking the point from what you talked about Hillary, this gentleman we met up in 2007 or so when I was kind of again on the trail. His name is Angrita Sherpa. Okay. And obviously, in today's world, everybody is there on the FB and Google and everything. But this gentleman, you will be surprised, in the 80s and 90s, he has summited Mount Everest 10 times,
Wow.
and all 10 times without oxygen.
Wow.
And I guess it is a record even till date.
Okay.
And very difficult for people to break it because most of the climbers, most of the Sherpa climbers who are professionally doing the job, they are now, it is mandatory for them to use the oxygen. So
Yeah.
probably they will not break his record. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So I think another very, since we're on the subject of books and climbing Everest, I think another very good book which everybody must read is Edmund Hillary's High Adventure. That talks is sort of an autobiographical book, and that talks about how he climbed Everest. And it's a beautiful book without any of this, this overhanging tragedy on it. And you really realize that he was. How should I say? I mean, he was as fit as the Sherpa because, which is why I thought of it because, now increasingly we are in a zone where climbers are, when you go you sign up with a commercial expedition, you don't carry enough load and it's your guide and your porter who's carrying all the load. You do carry for the last, when you do your summit, you do have to carry some amount of load, but the bulk of it is done by your team. But if you read about Hillary and Norgay, I think they were equally matched in strength. And it was in fact Hillary, when they came to that rock structure, which is called the Hillary Step, because that's where climbers were fumbling. They didn't know how to cross that. And he figured a maneuver, which in itself was, which is pretty great, considering that it was at that altitude. And though it's not a very, from what I gather from rock climbing friends, is that it's not a very difficult move, but he figured out how to climb it, which is why it's called the Hillary Step.
Sharmila, it is not about difficulty. It is that same move is to be done at 8,800 meters.
Exactly.
So it's not the same. Yeah.
And he's done a lot of work for Sherpa community. He has done a lot of work for Sherpa community. They never wanted the fame that came with it. And it's very apparent in the way they live their lives. So I think an absolutely amazing story, High Adventure. I think people should totally go for it.
Yeah. So this is a night kind of shot taken at Ferice. So I just thought of putting it up. And then we move further. This is, we are headed now towards Gorakshep via Lobuche and Tugla Pass, of course. This is the photo taken at Tugla Pass when it was snowing and you can see complete whiteout in the background. This is when the skies are clear, so you can see the same kind of, these are kind of cranes or small chortins which are kind of built up in the memory of many people who kind of again died on Mount Everest. And I'm sure there is a memorial, small rock memorial in the name of Rob Hall or Scott Fisher also.
Scott Fisher.
Yeah. And so you take a couple of pictures there and then you will move on to Lobuche. Lobuche is a kind of a short break, but then you have again quite a height out here because your Ferice is at almost 4,200 meters and Lobuche is at 4,900 meters. So there's a gain of almost 700 meters when you come to Lobuche, and you can feel the altitude out here. This is the Khumbu Glacier that you can see. I'm not saying Khumbu Icefall. There's Khumbu Glacier that you can see. You have to just climb up a small ridge across the kind of river, and you can see this glacier. It's an amazing sight. We normally go take people in the evening to that ridge. Yeah. And we will come down to Gorakshep, which is going to be your main hub for almost 1 night, 2 days nowadays. Sharmila, we stayed for, I guess, 2 days out there. Nowadays,
yeah, I think which you are now discontinued.
Yeah, we stay. And people can also see the trails leading up, especially this trail. This is Kalapathar. So this is the trekking peak where people can climb up to the top, which is at around 5,600 meters. And Everest Base Camp is further down into the valley, a walk of around 2.5 to 3 hours. And Sharmila, I've put up some interesting pictures today. Yeah. This is Gorakshep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And eventually we come to
Base camp.
Everest Base Camp from there, which is around 3 hours walk, not major climb for the base camp. You just gain around 200 meters, but it is a tiring day. Yeah. So
I think what makes it tiring is the fact that you're on sort of glacier moraine, and it's a very uneven trail, and
no, and even you're walking at 5,000 meters plus. So,
yes, and all this is at 5,000 meters. So that
yeah.
trail in itself is tough, plus you're at 5,000 meters.
Yeah.
And what you can see here are actually the expedition tents. I remember when we went in 2004, we were allowed to interact with climbers, but I believe that's not allowed anymore. Is that right?
No, you are supposed to kind of wait at a big boulder which says Everest Base Camp. I have those pictures, very interesting. So people will ask questions later maybe. And in the background, so you're not allowed to go inside the camp and meet up with the people because for hygiene reasons they don't allow. Yeah, if you remember during our time, we had gone and taken a complete round inside the base camp. Yes. And we then, a quick mention of this, then had met Kalpana Das. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it then. She climbed Everest again sometime in between, and she was again trying to make an attempt last year, and she died. It's a very unfortunate part, but we had met her in 2004 when she was trying for the first time. Yeah, and what you can see in the background, this is Khumbu Ice Fall. Yeah, which is the most dangerous part for crossing when you start the climb for Mount Everest. Yeah. Again, few pictures of Mount Everest. And Sharmila, don't ask me or don't question me, but still look at this picture.
Wow.
So I hope Sushma, she had come with us last year on the trip, and I hope she's there. Sushma, first of all, welcome and thank you very much for sharing these pictures with us. I thought it will add a lot of kind of fun part to the whole story. So it so happened that Sushma wanted to kind of come desperately to the base camp, and it so happened that she was not completely up to the mark. So just probably 50 or 100 meters before reaching the camp, I requested her to kind of go back to Gorakshep, yeah, which she reluctantly went. Probably cursed me also, but the call was taken looking at her condition. But later on, she recovered and she said, "Whatever happens, I have to go to the base camp." I said, "Okay, you go. I will organize everything for you tomorrow morning. You can do that and come back. No issues on that." And so she got up very early in the morning at 5. I gave her a guide and everything, and then she went alone to the Everest base camp with the guide. And here she is. She wanted to probably take these pictures.
Oh, I absolutely love this. This is making sari like a fashion statement in a sari at base camp.
And she herself is a cinematographer. Okay.
Oh, okay.
She has directed a couple of films and things like that.
Would look good.
Yeah, and that's what made her probably. This is my kind of just thinking that she wanted to take shots like that. Yeah. That satisfies their creativity in a way. And she didn't wear it when she left from Gorakshep. She carried it and she draped herself in this sari. I'm sure the guides would have been kind of completely crazy what she's doing, but yes, she did it, and hats off to her. Yeah, Sharmila, I decided to put up this again kind of quick illustrative map out here, because many people, they keep asking us that कि अरे यार base camp जाते हो तो ऊपर क्यों नहीं जाते हैं? People who are completely clueless, they have never been in the mountains, nothing wrong about that, but it is like saying that अरे Eiffel Tower गया था देखने तो second level पे क्यों नहीं गया? It is as simple as that for them. Yeah, they don't know what it involves. So I thought I should kind of just give a perspective to the whole thing. So you are at base camp at 5,334 meters, and then there are 4 more camps that one has to go. Okay, before you come to the South Col, which is the summit camp, and from there you climb another almost 850 meters to go to the summit and then back. And this whole exercise is happening above 5,300 meters.
Yes.
And this whole affair takes, because of acclimatization and the way things are done, it takes almost 40-45 days from base camp to base camp. I'm not adding any more days to that. And the line that has been drawn here, dotted line, it indicates that it is the line above this is 8,000 meters is called as death zone. So when practically what it means is like even if you're sitting idle, doing nothing, eating and doing nothing, still your body will deteriorate and you will die. So you're in that zone.
In short, your body is not, you're destroying red blood cells faster than you're making, and that's why it's the dead zone. And also, I think that what you need to sort of keep in mind when you're when you're saying, absolutely, I think every one of us has been asked this.
Many people.
Another 10,000 feet, and then you would have been on top of Everest. But
in fact, many
being like 18 is a completely different experience. And also, what you must remember is that when people go to climb Everest, they go in May because there is always a jet stream that is on top of the Everest, which makes it very difficult to climb in any other weather. And even when they do this whole exercise that you're talking of 45 days, at some point in time, they have to retreat and wait for what is called the window of good weather, where they get 3 days. And then actually in those 3 days, they just go from base camp to camp 2 to the last camp 4. And then they start walking actually at night at 12 o'clock. And I mean, it must be another experience to really just get out of your tent at 12 o'clock at night at that altitude and in that cold, and to start going for the summit, because you need to be back. You need to turn back at a certain time because the weather turns bad. And I remember these climbing teams, why I'm talking of this is that these climbing teams, when they descend normally to Felice or Debuche to sort of, because you have more oxygen there, and they go down to wait for that window of weather. And I remember when we were there in 2004, there were a group of Korean boys who were climbing. And it was, I think, the Petronas sponsored team or something like that, because you saw all these Petronas flags over there. No, they were not Korean, then they were Malaysian. I think there was a Malaysian and a Korean team. And I remember when they came and they were in the same lodge as us, and they were stinking. They were absolutely stinking. And you got this stink and you said, oh, where is this stink coming from? And it was coming from those boys because they hadn't had a bath for 40 days. And then fortunately they went and they cleaned up, and then they came back for the evening meal. And they had this huge platters of just boiled potatoes and boiled eggs, and they were just wolfing them down because they had all lost weight, and they were just piling on the food, and I can see everybody nodding there and saying yes, they were doing the carb loading and they were getting the protein in. But man, I mean, the way they ate those boiled potatoes and eggs was really something to see.
It's crazy, just crazy. But you come across so many people nowadays, especially where you get to interact. If you're in the spring season, that is in the month of May, you come across a lot of people who have come down rested. Last time when I was there, we met the couple. Unfortunately, that lady again died on the mountain. But the Mahajan couple, which was trying to attempt from Mulund, I met them at Debuche, much lower than that. And also one of my dear friend called Jayesh Morvankar, I met him there. So you come across and meet across a lot of people. This photo I've purposely again put up. This lady is Lydia, okay, and she's a New Zealander. And her story, we kind of came across and met her, and her story was like this. She was with her New Zealand kind of based out of team as a paramedic, so she didn't have a permit to climb. Okay, but she kind of got friendly with another expedition team, most likely from Australia. And so when the New Zealanders packed off and they decided to go back for some reason, she decided to hang around with the Australian team. And when she was staying around with them, she went up to Everest, climbed Everest and came back, and that too without oxygen. She was the first lady to climb without oxygen. Well, Missner was the only person before that, but she was the first lady to climb it without oxygen. Yeah. So you come across some, amazing people. Craziness is one part, but it is amazing. Yeah. We are all probably crazy in our own ways, but amazing and stunning people.
They're like the next level of crazy.
Absolutely. So it was fantastic interacting with, and you bump across and you meet such people. Yeah, always. This is, of course, Pumori, which is always towering above you at Gorakshep, one of the most beautiful mountains that one can see in the region. These are the trails you can see leading up to the mountain Kalapatthar. This is to Kalapatthar. Many people do, when we point out, many people feel that you are talking Kalapatthar as this summit. And then they said, यहाँ जाना है नहीं 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 यहाँ जाना है तो they say okay okay
ये भी बहुत है.
ये भी बहुत है. But quickly one story that I need to kind of tell. Once I was kind of there in 2007 with a group of ladies from Hong Kong, and it so happened that we were carrying walkie-talkies. And while carrying walkie-talkies, I was in touch with the Sherpa who was in the front, and I was kind of at the end, kind of trying to be at the last vehicle types. And while talking, they used to call me Milind sir, and I used to say, okay, Gopal, how are you? Where are you? Kind of stuff. And this conversation was picked up by someone, and I received a kind of a call saying that, Milind sir, where are you? I said, who the hell this is? He said, Karma. I said, Karma. I obviously realized who is this Karma because he had been on a couple of trips with me. So I said, Karma, where the hell you are here? Like, how the come you are here and how did you pick up my conversation? So he said, I'm at Camp 3 on Mount Everest. I said, what the hell? What are you doing? I said, yeah, this time I'm going to summit. I said, okay, great, all the best. It was out of the kind of blue. I was never expecting somebody calling me, Milind sir, where are you?
Milind, you're one person who will get a call even if you're on the Arctic Pole. Believe me.
So it was such a fun. It was really exciting. It was exciting that he was climbing, and I just wished him. And he did climb, and he did summit Mount Everest that season. And after that, also he did it for I think a couple of times. He did summit Mount Everest. So absolutely interesting stories all the time. You see.
Yeah.
Again,
I remember at one point when on another trek when we were having dinner on that Annapurna circuit trek. On our dinner table, there were 3 guys, and between them, they had summited Everest 10 times. I mean, like, what are the chances of that happening anywhere in the world but in Nepal? I mean, when you consider that there are about 5,700 people totally till July 2019 who have summited Everest, that you will have on your table 3 guys. I mean, if you just work it out in percentage terms, 3 guys, and between them, they have summited Everest 10 times. I mean, those are the people you meet. That's the reason why you need to go there.
Okay, Sharmila, I think this was, of course, the summit of Kalapatthar and the Pumori Gang.
Sort of move it a little fast.
Yeah, because we have already crossed 1 hour and we have another half an hour, 40 minutes to go.
No more stories.
Yeah, no, I will kind of keep 1 or 2 up my sleeves, but still. This is a stunning kind of summit where you can see Pumori and it's fascinating. Then you can see Mount Everest, Nuptse on the side. Again, fascinating. You can even see the Khumbu ice fall out here, which is more dramatic. And then we obviously start for our kind of return trail. Yeah. And as we keep bumping across, we met one more personality. This is Jamling Norgay, son of Tenzing Norgay. Yeah, and he has also written a book. He has also climbed. He also was guiding National Geographic team, and he has written a book, Touching My Father's Soul.
Which I read.
Okay. So you kind of meet so many interesting people around, and it's just fun to be with them and talk to them. Sharmila, I will quickly come to this. This is I have added up for you and your kind of clan, I would say. Yeah. He's the guy who was an assistant guide with me in 2012 when we did a trip, and he had run Everest Marathon. And he had kind of obviously won a medal. So he was in the first
team. Yeah. So for all my running friends, this is to give you marathon goals. There's a marathon that happens in this region. So you run from the Khumbu Ice Fall, which we just saw, which is Everest Base Camp, and you run down all the way to Namche Bazaar. You've seen the road, you've seen the trail. Now you guys need to get ready for it and go for it. This is an amazing race. It's held every year. And obviously the locals win because there's no way that you would be acclimatized enough to run there. But guys, go for it.
I have included this picture only to tell Sharmila that it is sadly now many people on the way back, they want to kind of hop into a chopper and go as if like tick mark ho gaya, chal padte hain.
Yeah.
And I usually tell them that now is the fun part, because now on the way down you're acclimatized, you're fit, you can just kind of fly down.
And you can drink Kukri Ram.
You can drink Kukri Ram and you can have a blast on the way back. But
do as the Nepalese do.
yeah. So, but that's the way. Otherwise, we kind of say bye-bye to the mountains, all the big mountains that we have seen
Yes.
on our way up. And I'm going to put one picture to make you jealous, okay? So these are the mountains that we say. So you come back to Kusumkangari and to the Namche Bridge, and here we are. You know what this is? This is a lodge. which we have started using on the way back. So we want to kind of splurge. Okay.
Oh.
And I'm sure all the people appreciate that, because you have a very clean, warm bed.
Wow.
Hot shower attached. You can kind of have a hot shower bath, probably shave after 10-15 days, and and then have a 5-course meal. Dinner.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what we have started
Wow.
doing. Yeah. And you see this. This is the helipad out here,
Oh.
outside the window. Yeah. And so many of rich American clients or Western clients or Japanese clients who come, they do heli trekking. So they hop into the.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're back.
Yeah. So I'm talking about like the last party. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Everybody who
Yati food.
if you have submitted Everest, you get a free
पप्पा
meal.
तुम्हें खिचड़ घर में तका
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Come. So continue, Sharmila.
Yeah, so if you've submitted Everest, you get a free meal for life. You need to just prove
Yeah.
that you submitted Everest, and Rambodo gives you a free meal
All
for
your
life.
life.
And they
Yeah.
have these charming coasters which are in the name of, which are in the shape of feet, which is interesting because everybody has felt their feet by the time they are done with all the walking. And then
Yeah.
you sign on it, and it makes a great memoir to take back home with you.
So they give small ones which you can take back, and they give big ones you can put it up in their bar.
In their wall,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So that's how it is. Okay, guys. People are
Best
getting
for the
little.
last.
Best for the last. Okay, and I will be opening up for the kind of question and answer session a little later, but trust me, just hang around for 5 more minutes. These are some stunning pictures of the Everest region that I've ever seen in my life. I've been kind of first trip that I did with Sharmila was in 2004, and after that I've been going quite often. I would say I've been at least 8 times or so the base camp trip. And this gentleman Arseny is a kind of Ukrainian national. He is a travel journalist. His clients are, as you can see, National Geographic, Vogue. So his passion is photography, and he has taken some amazing stuff for shots. And Arseny, I'm sure if you're there on this meeting, then thank you very much and so much for sharing these photos with us. Otherwise, this is going to add tremendous value to my presentation today, because I wouldn't have got such kind of pictures ever otherwise. Yeah. So thank you, and absolutely thank you so much. And Basanta, thanks to you, because you are the common friend between Arseny and me for sharing these pictures with us. Yeah. So we will just kind of go through the slides. I won't talk much, and then we'll open up for the Q&A session. Yeah. Nichiketa, you can put on mute others, please. This is the same Sanasa Lodge.
Look at that sky.
Yeah. This just to kind of this is the same bridge before that bridge that you crossed before climbing Namche, and
Yes.
this is the new one. This is the old one.
Old one. So now there is like
now
a
you have to
two-layer
go.
bridge. Yes.
Yeah. So you go from the bridge that is on the higher level, but you can see the roaring Botekoshi River flowing below.
Oh, man.
Amada Blama in the background. Ferice again.
Ooh,
It is,
look at the colors.
yeah, and see the clouds, the green colors, the shade of green
Yes.
colors, the white mountains. It's like mesmerizing, absolutely mesmerizing. I've never seen such pictures. Trust me. You can see the settlement of Fericha again here. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Gokyo.
Gokyori.
If you
Wow.
look at my map, like the map when I explained, I kind of showed you the Gokyo lake also. This is wow, and next is you will not be able to say even wow. We will just your jaw will just drop. Yeah.
Look at
Unreal. It just looks unreal. Yeah. But I have been here. I know it's stunning. But what a
unreal.
shot! What a shot!
Unreal. Unreal.
Oof.
Probably taken from the top of Gokyo, the reef,
Must be.
looking down at the lake, because you can see the village over there on the left.
Yeah, and the trails leading down
The
and all that.
settlement and the trails leading to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oof. So thank you, Arshini, once again, and thank you, Basanta. It's still not over.
I think you are that. Wow.
This peak we did not see, so I want to kind of just tell people that this is Lhotse seen from the Everest Base Camp much inside. Yeah, so that is the reason one can see this peak. Pumori. Look at the color,
Yeah.
shade of pink and violet. Setting sun. This is Mount Everest. This is Dupse. And usually the sunrise is from behind Everest. So this is a shot taken in the evening. Yeah.
Sunset.
Maybe from Kalapatar itself, because you can see these prayer flags.
Yeah.
One more.
Wow.
Last evening fading kind of light.
Yeah.
And here you go. What a sky. Yeah. No, this is Gorakshep and this is Pumori. Oof. Oof. It is just oof. And I don't know, you can see some lights here, the bright lights here.
Yeah.
It's quite bright. So either it is a reflection of something, I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
yes. But what a picture! What a picture! Oof. Picture hai already put up. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so Sharmila, I think we come to the end of our session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaste from Nepal and everywhere to you and everyone. And now we will open up for question and answer kind of a session. I will advise is people who want to kind of ask questions should raise their hand, and Nichiketa will or Kiran will unmute you because that becomes easier. Because if I unmute everyone, then there is a lot of chaos and there's kind of nobody can listen anything. Yeah. So I will unmute you, and even if you need to talk, just kind of raise your hand and Nichiketa will unmute you. So that's what my suggestion will be. So Nichiketa, just check with whether people want to kind of, anybody has raised their hand and you can unmute them and they can kind of talk.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm doing that one by one, and there are a few questions which we've already got here.
So that I will take it a little later, but you can, or those same people can raise their hand and ask questions. It's completely fine. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'm unmuting few people so that they can speak. This is Mr. Ashish.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Ashish. Good evening. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Just give me a moment.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Hi, Sharmila. Hi, Milan.
Hi. Hi.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was absolutely amazing hearing both of you, and in fact, got inspired. Want to go for the Everest Base Camp as early as possible.
You need to go for the marathon, dude. You need to go for the marathon. Don't go for the trek. Go for the marathon.
Yeah. I heard that too from from EBC to Namche Bazaar. Yes.
Yes.
यदि EBC पहुंच गए तो EBC से Namche Bazaar भी आ
Yeah, दीपक को काम पे
जाएंगे.
लगा देंगे.
So,
Yeah.
in that quick one, what sort of
Yeah.
acclimatization training or sort of preparation would be required
See,
before one embarks on this journey?
As I got to know now from Sharmila that you are a marathoner, so the fitness level is sorted. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as far as acclimatization is concerned, technically one has to keep his fingers crossed. You have to take a whole lot of precautionary measures because that's the only thing works. You can't really prepare yourself for acclimatization. Yeah, and what we usually do is like we spend 2 days, as we said, in Namche Bazaar to acclimatize, and 2 days we give in Feriche to acclimatize, and that usually works, is what I've seen. Of course, because everybody has a little, they are tight on the schedules, and so one can't really have more time. Yeah, but so if you spend those kind of days, it is kind of one can easily do it. That's not a problem. Yep.
So,
And
quick
if I
follow.
can add here,
Yeah.
if you want to run, you have to go spend more time and you
Yeah,
have to
that
practice
we will
running,
have to.
because when you're walking on the, when you're doing the trek, you actually see people training for the trek, for the marathon. So you have all these boys crossing you with their, those water packs, hydration packs, and they're running up and down the trail that we are walking on. So that's the first time when I was in 2004, when I realized that there is a marathon that happens, because we used to see these boys running up and down. So that's what you need to get ready for, Ashish.
I
Fair.
think I would like to kind of unmute here on the same topic Dr. Mendele, who was there with me in 2012, and he himself has kind of been on marathons a couple of times, and I like what he wants to comment. Let's hear to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nisita, please kind of bring in Dr. Mendele, please.
Yeah, while she brings in Dr. Mindre,
Yeah.
Milind,
Yeah.
how many days it is a round trip from, say, Mumbai to Mumbai?
You should budget for around, say, 16 days, I would say, because it is better to keep at least a day or two extra in your hand, because these flights to Kula are conditional to weather, and usually they mess up the schedule. Yeah. So we always advise people to keep 2 days on return in Kathmandu, so that then you can prepone your flight if we are early and if you want to go early. Otherwise, rescheduling and everything gets into a mess.
Okay.
Yeah, doctor, you're there?
Yeah, I am here.
Yeah.
So you were the witness, and you have kind of given me the picture of that Dhane.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. See, this Dhane, I saw his medal and I asked him how much time he took. He said 11 hours. He got some place. I asked him who was the winner, who took how much time. So he said 7 hours. Now, by that time I had run 9 marathons, 2 full and 7 half. But my full marathon at sea level, I had taken 7 hours. So he really put into my balloon.
Doc, I don't want to ask your age when you ran that marathon, okay? I've already given up on that.
Whatever
They are like young boys.
Whatever it is.
And they live there.
To go
Extra
from
nitrogen.
to go from Gorakshep to Dukla in 7 hours is something.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is
And on
something.
that trail.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And as I told you that we missed flight twice to Dukla.
Hmm.
We were getting 2 groups. By the time we reached Gorakshep, the first group was already on the way back. When we reached Gorakshep, it was hot sun. The Kala Patthar was black. Next day early morning, 4:30, Milind woke us up because it had snowed overnight. And the scene was wonderful. The Kala Patthar was totally white. And myself and Sunita, we could climb up to Kala Patthar, and the view was stunning. And I thank my stars that I missed those 2 flights. Because had I come 2 days before, I wouldn't have had that view.
And also you came across this marathoners, I guess.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that time it was not marathon. When I was coming back, I believed that Dhane, because I saw a fellow running from Gorakshep towards Dukla. So I didn't want to stop him. I just asked him, what are you doing? Are you practicing for marathon? He made thumbs up, yes.
No. Doctor, if you remember, I did a back-to-back trip that year. So you guys we came back and then I had another group. When I get wind with that group, we saw the actual marathon happening.
Right.
I saw it in the next trip, next trip that I did. Yeah. Nijiketa, anybody else on kind of want to have on the questions?
No, right now nobody is raising their hands, but I have few questions here.
So you can kind of put up those questions.
Yeah. So Dr. Santosh Bhide had a question. Is there any other way, if we can skip Lukla flight and can we reach,
No, so the only other option, technically there are two options. One can kind of trek all the way to Lukla, but it doesn't make sense because it's an additional 7 days. Yeah. And the other thing one can do is take a chopper to Lukla. Typically, a chopper trip would cost, one way would cost anywhere around, say, $2,500 to $2,800. Yeah. So it depends on if you're a group of 4 people, then you can divide the cost. If you're just kind of 2 people, then you'll have to bear the cost of that entire trip. Yeah. So that is the only option, and we always tell people that you have to kind of budget for that as the worst scenario, because if the flight doesn't fly for 2 days, then we are left with no choice but to kind of go with chopper. So you have to pay the difference between the flight fare and the chopper cost. So one has to kind of be prepared for doing that.
So, to just add a perspective here, Milind, when Hillary climbed to Everest, they started walking in Darjeeling.
Yeah, true. Now later on it was Jari.
Walking.
Yeah. Later on it was Jari. So
Jari,
yes. So you can add up 7 days of trek and still go. But it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Getting to Everest, they had already been walking to Everest base camp. They had already been walking for 2 months.
Yeah. So Nijiketa, any further questions?
Yes, Nilima Kale wants to ask some question. I'll just unmute her.
Yeah.
Nilima must have gone off by.
Hi, Milind and Sharmila. So good to see
Hi.
you here. Yeah. So, a couple of questions for the benefit of the listeners is that, which I experienced last year when I went with Milind to Everest Base Camp, is that we are living in a digital world, and therefore everybody wants to be connected, even while we don't want to be connected because we are going to the mountains. But what are the options that we have right now? Because there, while we were climbing, we got to know that there is a connectivity pass or something like that. That is question number 1. Question number 2 is that if anybody can't make it, or if they have a difficulty going on, then what are the options of going back?
Okay. So Nilima, there are kind of first, I will ask the first question. So the connectivity over a period of time has improved a lot, as you have also experienced.
Yeah.
If you have a Nepal kind of service provider, then you can kind of connect right up to Gorakshep, or even on your global roaming. Yeah. And as far as the internet goes, they give you kind of an Everest card. Once you kind of key into the Wi-Fi of any lodges, you get onto the Wi-Fi immediately. So it's a kind of card that you get in different denomination, which you can buy, and then you're connected on the Wi-Fi also. But that is only when you are in the lodges, not otherwise. Really, not when you're on the trail. On the trail, the mobile connectivity is most of the time there, except for small 1 or 2 patches where in Feriche, you don't get the connectivity, and at Lobuche, you have to walk a little bit to get the connectivity. So that kind of answers your first question. And if somebody can't make it and somebody has to turn back. So typically the way we function is we have a lot of staff members with us, which is like assistant guides, you can say, which we carry or which we have with us. So the purpose is like if somebody is not kind of able to walk, so it's not a medical emergency, but the person is just physically unfit and he is not able to kind of do it. So in that case, we kind of ask that person to kind of turn around or walk slowly and go back in a slow fashion. Or if he is very close to Gorakshep also, and it is only a question of physical ability, we probably ask them to break the journey and kind of join us at further point. Yeah, which is also possible. But or even worse scenario, even a horse you can get to ride all the way to base camp. So these are the possibilities, but this is not doesn't mean that anybody and everybody should kind of get onto that mode. This is if you're physically fit, there's no acclimatization problem, but physically you're like probably not able to kind of stretch it that much, then this can be an option. But the moment you have altitude sickness, definitely depending upon the emergency, two things are done. If it is not an emergency, a person will be sent back with a guide. And because of the connectivity, we are always on connective to them. And in case of if the person develops some critical symptoms, then they are evacuated with a chopper. And choppers are available on a call. So technically, the chopper will just come in 1 hour or 2 hours max and pick you up and take the person even back to Kathmandu if it is necessary. Yeah. But that is the reason we also ask people to buy a cashless insurance, not the reimbursement insurance, because the chopper cost of flying from anywhere in Gorakshep region down to Kathmandu in case of serious emergency is $9,000. Yeah, and nobody has money to kind of, or they will not give you credits for that. Yeah, so if it is a cashless insurance only, then it works, not otherwise. Yeah. So I hope this answers the question, Nilima.
Yes, it does. I have one more.
Bolo.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah, quickly. So, Milind, you have been to EBC so many times, also in other regions. Sharmila, you too. Has there been any point in time where you said that, I'm bored of doing this trail so many times. I don't want to do it anymore. Or does every trip make you see different things and give you different experiences?
I think, Sharmila, you answer first, because for me it's a job.
I think you should answer first, because I haven't
Okay.
done I haven't done so many treks multiple times. But
No,
I
so-
mean, honestly, I don't think I'd have a problem, because at the end of the day, as Ahilya says, that everything is green, everything is beautiful. So how can it matter?
Yeah, absolutely. See, if you ask me, we are too occupied with a lot of other things also in terms of organization, because you must have seen it last time. We were a group of 27. So kind of check on everybody's condition at the end of the day, take their oximeter, look at their oximeter count and things like that. That kind of keeps us fairly busy, and some cases that you find where you need to be a little alert, you keep watching them and things like that. But that's a part of the job. If you ask me, at the end of the day, I will anytime prefer to do that job than sitting in the office. So I think that answers everything for me. Yeah.
Milind,
Yeah. Doctor, tell us.
no, I would suggest one must do EBC, but I think Annapurna Base Camp is very picturesque.
It is very beautiful.
We go
Even Annapurna Circuit,
Yeah.
Annapurna Base Camp, they're really beautiful treks.
Annapurna Base Camp, I tell people that it's a honeymoon trek. You can break it in number of days to make it easy. You're walking at lower elevation. You're walking through forest and greenery most of the time. Only last 2 days where it's like Machapuchare and Base Camp. See, Annapurna Base Camp
That's
proper
a
is at just 4,000 meters.
But
So
when you reach Annapurna Base Camp, it is like an amphitheater. It's a lovely place.
Yeah, it is stunning. So absolutely stunning place. Yeah.
And I think Nepal really spoils you in that sense, because of this tea house concept. You're spoiled, because you can sleep well at night and you're comfortable and you have good food to eat, hot food. I think now you can even have baths, so it's amazing.
Yeah.
It really spoils you.
Nichiketa, are there any questions? Because I want to kind of complete the questions before
Yes.
yeah.
Miss, Dr. Partha Gokhale has a question. I'll just unmute him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is on unmute. Yes, Dr.
Hi,
Partha.
Milind. Good to
Hi,
connect
Parth.
you after a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you?
I'm fine.
Yeah,
Just wanted to ask you, when is this trek conducted? Which time of the year?
See, we are kind of trying to, because this year has been a kind of a washout year for us, and all the people are asking you, where do we go, where do we go? So we are kind of technically scheduled the trip again in the month of October, that is 2nd October to 17th October. But keeping our fingers crossed, we need to see how things develop as far as this Corona COVID-19 is concerned. But Nepal has kind of officially opened. They have said that by 13th or 14th of August, they're going to start international flights, local flights, and there will be no more lockdown. So Nepal is open. The question is about India. Yeah, and usually this trip happens in 2 slots. So one is the springtime, which is typically April, May, and the second slot usually is in the month of October. Later also one can do the trip in the month of November, December, but it gets very cold as you go later in the season. So I would say one can do it at the most till end of October. Later on, it will be really, really cold. And April, May has both days have their own pros and cons. So October trips, usually the weather is nice, crispy, clear skies, good light, so very nice in terms of weather. Whereas April, May, you can get rainfall, you can get clouds and things like that, but you're still approaching summer, so the temperature doesn't dip in a way. And the fun part of spring is you come across these old climbers and people who are waiting for going there to their summits and things like that. So that is the fun part of springtime, that is April, May. Yeah. So these are the 2 slots.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ichiketa, more questions?
No more questions as in,
Fantastic.
but people are just asking if we are floating any departure.
So as I said, immediately in month of October, we are aiming at 2nd of October to, I think, 17th October should be the date. So starting from Friday and probably coming back after 2 weeks. The trip is already scheduled. It is already planned. What we will do, Nichiketa, is we'll kind of mail the trip details to all the people who had signed up for this event.
Sure.
So we don't miss out on anyone. And they are free to sign up because we already have 6-7 people who are keen in month of April, so those bookings are getting shifted for October. Yeah, perfect. So if we are done with Q&A, I think I should once again thank Sharmila. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Vasanta, and thanks everyone for joining this session and listening to us.
Milind sir, I think
yeah.
Dr. Mendhare wants to say something.
Yeah, doctor, tell me.
I'm looking forward to Sharmila telling us about.
Yeah, that is the session that we will held, earthquake session. Yeah. Sharmila, you're listening to that?
Yeah.
So we will have one more.
2015 earthquakes.
Yeah, just quickly for people who don't know about this, she was on the Manalsu circuit trek with another 4 friends of ours, and they were stuck in the earthquake and they were not contactable for almost a period of a week or so. And finally they were rescued out. And so that's a great story. We'll run through that story sometime soon. And also one session I'm going to do of virtual climbing to Mount Everest top. So we have always seen the pictures of Lukla to base camp, but we don't know about what happens base camp to the summit and the photographs and pictures in that. So I'm going to run that session too. Yeah. Hopefully I will be able to do it soon. So once again, thank you so much for everyone. And please, we will be posting this video on our YouTube channel. So if you have liked it, just like it and share it.
Subscribe.
Thank you once again. Subscribe. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.